What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ Bucky back with you, and we've got a fun show today. We got a lot of news to get to, but we also have two of our favorite people we get to work with on a daily basis joining the show today. And even more exciting than having them join us is the fact that they are launching a brand new podcast. It's our buddies Steve Wyche and Jim Trotter. They have a new podcast. We're going to give you a little taste of it here before we bring the fellas in here. Here's a little taste of their new pod.
Welcome to the Huddle and Flow podcast with me, Steve Wyche, and my NFL Network colleague, Jim Trotter, where we're all about the NFL, pop culture, the culture, and where we're going to have discussions that might make you squirm, but will also make you think.
Yeah, we've got more than 40 years of experience covering the NFL, and what we want to give you here is something that's authentic, that's raw, that's real talk from two black men from historically black colleges, viewing the NFL through a different prism. We've got stories, information, context, on and off the field, all things that will show you this is no ordinary podcast.
And Jim, the coronavirus, the pandemic, I mean, this has really changed our lives, everyone's lives in the world, and absolutely in the NFL.
We'll also be joined out of the gate by somebody who can tell us firsthand about all of that and a lot more.
Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, so many deaths this summer of unarmed black people. It spilled into the NFL. So on that note, Jim, of all the things you've heard NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell say, where does Black Lives Matter rank?
Right at the top of the list, Steve. To hear the commissioner come out and say that definitely signals what appears to be a new era in the NFL.
But Jim, also, you are a Pro Football Hall of Fame selector. You think you might be able to pull some gold jackets onto the Huddle and Flow podcast?
Steve, you know we will be pulling Hall of Fame guests on our show, without question.
This is the Huddle and Flow podcast. And if you don't know, you will know. And if you do know Jim, you know.
That is fantastic. The Huddle and Flow. How cool is that, man? I couldn't be more excited for this podcast. And hey, Steve, I'll start with you. First of all, awesome trailer, by the way. The thing that stood out to me, and I don't remember if it was you or Jim that said it, but just real. Like there's no pretense here. This is going to be in your face. This is real stuff, and I love that.
Well, DJ, it is real stuff, and you guys know Jim and I, and you know, we keep it real. You know, I think one of the reasons why we are where we are is because we're pretty fearless about what we do. And that's what this podcast is going to be. Now, it's not all going to be 100% serious, and it is going to be football. Okay, so we're going to talk football, but we're also going to talk some of the things that affect football socially, health-wise. I mean, in our debut, in our first episode, we've got two NFL head coaches that are dealing with some significant health issues or have dealt with them. So we're going to talk about all of these things. And what's cool is I send it over to Jim, as you heard in the trailer. Jim and I both went to Howard University. This is the year of Howard University, as is every year, because as Jim will tell you, whenever you meet somebody from Howard, all we do is brag about how great Howard is. But again, and one of the things that's going to be really cool also about this format is Jim and I are going to do justice to the history, the legacy, and the future of HBCUs in the NFL, into society, because of what they've done for us and what they mean to us and what they've done for the NFL, which typically only gets recognized during Black History Month.
Yeah, you know, DJ and Bucky, some of the best conversations that we have at work are back in the green room, and they're discussions that never make it on the air. And we just wanted an opportunity to have some of those discussions in a public forum, and to give fans, I think, a peek behind the curtains of what people are really thinking, how they're feeling, and particularly as it relates to subjects and people that often may feel their voices are marginalized or not heard at all. So from my standpoint, I just want to be sort of the voice of fans, if you will, and be able to talk about things and ask questions that they want, you know, that they want to hear and they want answered. And I think by doing that, that's what being authentic is. That's what being real is. That's what being, raw with it. and I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and well, I'm sure we'll go through a few growing pains, but hopefully we get better each week.
And quickly, guys, I want to make this abundantly clear. This is not some knee-jerk reaction by NFL media saying, "Oh my God, this has been the summer of social discourse. Let's give two black guys a podcast." Jim and I have been working on this in some form or fashion for a long time.
2 years.
And so, yeah, for 2 years. And so, yes, the timing may seem coincidental, but frankly, I don't care what it seems like because the timing is important. Really, it's important right now.
Yeah, it's funny because you guys are two of my, I guess, most respected mentors, because both you guys are chiefly responsible for me being able to sit in this seat and show way, shape, or form. First with Jim, when we worked together at Sports Illustrated, and I would call you countlessly to ask for advice on how to write and how to put things together. And then Steve, who actually helped me make my way over to NFL media. And so I'm very excited for both you guys to have the platform. But you talked about 2020 and 2020 being such a unique set of circumstances. You have the pandemic, you have this social discourse. Why are you guys well positioned to now be a voice of reason during this turbulent time?
Jim?
Well, Bucky, I can say this. You know, I think as you get older, you start to ask the question of sort of what's your purpose? And when you're young, you're trying to make your way in the business. You're trying to make your name, all those sorts of things. And for me, it was really back around the time that Colin took a knee that I realized, you know, I'm closer to the finish line than the starting line in my career. And when all is said and done, what do I want to really be remembered for? And I just wanted to follow my passion. And at this point, that was about giving a voice to these players who feel like they're not being heard. And I always tell this story about that Dr. Harry Edwards told me about the conversation he had with Roger Goodell back in 2006 when Roger was elected commissioner and he flew out to the Bay Area to meet with Dr. Edwards to talk about the state of the league. And Dr. Edwards told him that the demographics of the league were changing and that more black players were coming into the league and they were going to become the face of the league. And they were not going to leave their communities behind. And I think that's so important because so many people just view them as football players and they're three-dimensional human beings. And for me, really since 2016 in particular, it's been about following that passion of trying to tell their stories about who they are as people and not just about players.
Steve, I'd love to get to you on this because it seems to me, and we've seen it in the kind of the what's going on practice fields throughout all sports, but really let's just focus on the National Football League. It seems to me this is a more united, players group, players union, whatever you want to call it, than I've ever seen in terms of these guys, no matter color, black, white. It seems like we're all kind of hearing guys come and saying the same things right now. I don't recall a time in league history where we've seen this type of unification. What's your opinion? You guys have got a little bit more gray hair than I do, Steve. So you've been around a little bit longer. What's your take on kind of where we are now versus where we've been historically in that regard? You
are lying so bad because you are going to get an endorsement deal for Just Men right now. Look, we're seeing these players united in all of these pro sports leagues because I think for the first time, and this is where I think honestly the WNBA has been the most fearless in saying, if we lose our jobs, okay, fire us. What are you going to have to play with? Okay, so now the NBA says, oh, you want to sit us down like you guys did Colin Kaepernick? Okay, you're going to have to sit down the whole NBA. You're going to have to shut it down. And I think that's where NFL players are starting to realize that if these owners try to, I'm going to put it this way kindly, not hire them like they did to Colin Kaepernick and some of the other people who staged these protests 4 years, they're going to have to shut the league down. And we've seen people going back to the 60s saying that if athletes of color would ever join forces and unify in their protest, in their resources, it would be a game changer. So that's what I think we're seeing now. And you're going to have an audience say, okay, go ahead and sit out. You won't get paid. If these athletes of color go ahead and sit out, you won't have games to cheer for. You won't be able to have people over to tailgate and to drink your beverages and to woo-hoo and then dismiss in the streets a little bit later on. So it's just really an intriguing time. And one thing I want to make clear what we're going to do with this podcast is it's not just black. We're going to have voices on there that may have contrary ideas, because the back and forth discussion is what Jim and I and everyone, I think, need to have. One, to educate each other, and the other to empathize and understand one another. And we also want to talk, as Jim mentioned, to marginalized communities. I've got a lot of ties to the Polynesian communities as well. This is a huge factor in the NFL. Tua Tagovailoa is going to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. These are voices we don't hear about. So again, we're trying to be some messengers, some conduits to the public for a lot of voices that people don't typically hear from. And we just think, again, it's an important time that we envelope everybody involved in the NFL and outside of the NFL. Because, again, we're going to have health officials, entertainers, politicians on here to talk about how the whole world is affecting sports.
And if I could follow up on that, DJ, to your question about unity, I think 4 years ago, these feelings that players are having, particularly black players, are not new. But 4 years ago, when Colin took a knee, they were afraid to demonstrate. And Alexander Madison, the backup running back for the Vikings, told me, he said, back then, you were worried about being fined. You were worried about being disciplined. You were worried about being released. He said, now there is strength in numbers. There's unity. And he said, if you fine one of us, you fine all of us. If you discipline one of us, you discipline all of us. If you release one of us, you release all of us. And that's why I think I'm particularly intrigued to see, for instance, when you have an owner like Jerry Jones, who essentially has threatened players that if you kneel, if you demonstrate during the anthem, you will not play. Well, I think now what we're seeing is that will not only impact the Cowboys, there will be players on other teams who will respond to that as well. And so you have to be careful there. The other thing I would say to you, what's different now too, is Steve mentioned the 1960s, and back then it was black players alone who were speaking out. Now you see more white players. You see in all sports now, and it's not just a national issue now, it's an international issue. We can go around the globe to where we're seeing demonstrations in all sorts of countries. So I think, again, there is that strength in unity, that strength in numbers, that people feel like they're not on an island and that they have support. And so when the Milwaukee Bucks see the Detroit Lions cancel practice, and the next day they decide to cancel a game, and then I start getting calls from NFL players saying, we really want to cancel a game. We want to boycott a game. There is no island, and it's one giant community, international community, really.
You know, Jim, it's funny. You talk about that, and you talk about, I guess, the uniting of all of these different voices in the locker room. And for so long, politics and religion and so many other things were kind of kept out of the locker room. Well, now we're seeing those things filter not into the locker room, but also onto the field. What do you think about this new world where we are seeing the intermingling of sports and politics play out in real time and in front of everybody for the world to see?
Well, I think it was a lot easier to keep it separated back in the day when there was no social media, when even there was no internet, and teams had greater control of their players. One of the things I know about NFL players, particularly, is that since Morris Smith came in as executive director, he wanted them to see themselves as business people and not just as football players. He wanted them to view themselves as partners with the owners and not just as employees. And I think we're seeing players start to take that to heart, to where, as Roger Goodell said, there is no NFL without black players. And so you are seeing these players start to step up and realize the power in their voice and their actions and the platforms that they have. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all. As you know, Bucky, as a former player, there are discussions that take place in the locker room that never make the light of day. So I'm sure guys, and I've never been an NFL player, but just having worked in NFL locker rooms, that guys have discussions about some of these things. And the beauty of an NFL locker room, or just a professional athlete's locker room, is that you have people from all different walks of life, different races, different religious backgrounds, different economic backgrounds, all those sorts of things, and yet they all come together for a common purpose. And that's why I think there's so much strength in that. And I think society at large can learn from that.
And guys, look, those conversations were always kept in house, like at any workplace before. Yeah. But now we're also seeing, when you talk about politics intermingling with athletics, it seems like every week now a president or political figure is asked to question about athletics. This week I think the president one of his associates was asked about the NBA players not playing. So that's all part of it as well. So everything is intermingling. I mean, but of course everything came to a head when a couple of years ago when the president referred to the NFL players as sons. Okay, that tore down. It's not building a wall. That tore down a wall in terms of having discussions about politics and ethnic conversations and social conversations. So it's not a one-way street here. And that, again, these are conversations that we hope to have with people a lot smarter than us on the Huddle and Flow podcast.
Oh, that's great. This is, again, for people that are just hearing this and what this discussion is like, trust me when I tell you, these are two of the most connected guys in the National Football League. So not only are you going to hear the great discussions as you're hearing right now, you're going to hear guests, Hall of Fame guests. You're going to have, as I said, coaches coming on early on. You're going to hear from them as well. It's a conversation. I think it's an important conversation. It's a conversation I look forward to hearing from you guys. While we have you, though, I want to get you on some stuff that's going on right now in the National Football League on the field. Let me start with you, Jim. When you look around the league right now and where we are from a COVID standpoint, from a testing standpoint, and the low numbers, give me like a Jim Trotter optimism reading here. Like, how optimistic are you that we've got a pretty good system in place to be able to work through this season?
DJ, I'm more optimistic than I was at the start of training camp, simply because when the league had set a baseline number for positive tests, and they are so far under that number. And what that says to me is that everyone's taking this seriously, and the discipline that the players are showing in terms of not putting themselves out there in situations that could compromise their health. So from that standpoint, I'm more optimistic than I was at the start of camp. Now, having said that, we haven't gotten to a point yet where teams are traveling, where they're staying in hotels, where they're out and about for a road game, that sort of thing. So the numbers could change. But I have to say, I think the league, the Players Association, and the players have done a tremendous job at this point. Because everyone that I was talking to beforehand, no one thought that the numbers would be as low as they are right now. So that's a major testament to how these players, coaches, and everyone else is taking this seriously.
Discipline, right, Steve? I mean, that to me, this is a sport where you win or lose based on how disciplined you are. And I've been kind of overwhelmed, honestly, with how disciplined everybody has been to keep us where we are at this point.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the key, is the discipline. But I think what's encouraging also, let's give credit to maybe some of the family members and everything of these players, because, usually not all these players are staying in hotels like they typically do in training camp or dorms. These guys are going home. So, I mean, they've sent the message across to their spouses or friends or whomever or relatives who may live with them, don't bring this stuff in here. And so that to me is why I'm encouraged we're going to get in all 16 games. Now, granted, there may be some outbreaks on some teams, and they may have to postpone a game or two here and there and maybe make it up on a bye week like we saw with the Marlins and the St. Louis Cardinals in Major League Baseball. But I just think that the fact that everyone is kind of understanding the importance of this, and the fact that nobody really wants to get sick, I think that's a huge element of this. And if we in regular society can continue to do what we're doing to bring these numbers down, I'm actually encouraged, to some degree, that we might have some fans in the stadiums by the halfway point of the season, maybe not full capacity, but more than just some of the partial capacities we're seeing at a handful of stadiums to start the season.
Stephen, and thinking about the fans, because the X factor is the outside world. Coaches and general manager executives, they can get around the players and tell them to make the right decisions. But what you can't control are the outside factors, the outside world, where people aren't wearing masks, if they are not engaging in behaviors that are appropriate based on what the regulations are. To what level or to what extremes are these teams going to really employ their players to really stay away from the outsiders and to keep it to a position where they can protect not only themselves, but everybody on the team by not making these risky choices and endeavors, particularly when we get to the regular season and the routine goes back to being what they're accustomed to having?
Yeah, they're putting bubbles around every late night chicken wing place in certain markets. No, but what these teams, first off, is in the restructured CBA, they put disciplinary measures in there if they find players out hanging out at clubs or going to these late night chicken wing places. So there are disciplinary measures.
CWPs, is that what we call them? CWPs?
Yeah,
exactly
chicken wing places.
So players can get fined, suspended, disciplined if they violate something. So that's part of it. But I mean, some of the things that the teams are doing, it's constant reminders. And and I spoke with Reggie Scott, the LA Rams vice president of sports and medicine, before players reported. And he said the main thing is educating them. We know the basics: wash your hands, social distance, wear a mask. Then, of course, they've got all these different things in their facilities. But educating them is to where they take all of these practices home. Okay, it's like when we were 16 and we were bus boys at restaurants and we've got to mop up the floor every 30 minutes or wipe tables down. They said, take this stuff at home and your mom's going to be real happy with the way you're cleaning up after yourself. That's kind of the thinking here with these NFL teams. Go home. Make sure that, everyone's washing. If they go out for, if your kids go out and they're playing in playgrounds, whatever, clean them off before you set them down on the furniture, whatever it takes. And those are the practices now that are really going to have to be pushed. The message is pushed for when players get back into kind of their regular mainstream of living when training camp breaks. Most of them are breaking this week.
Trot, I want to know if you can join me and Bucky in our pinky promise that we've made to each other. We have pinky swore that we are not going to bail on the Arizona Cardinals. We are both in on the Arizona Cardinals being a playoff team this year. We are buying it because of two things. You win in football today, as we always talk about on this podcast, you win with quarterback play and pass rush. That's the way the game's played. It's a quarterback league, and it's can you get to the quarterback? And when I look at Kyler Murray, and Bucky and I have talked about him, we think he's going to win an MVP in the next 2 to 3 years. Like, he's that good. And you've got Chandler Jones and company on that defensive front. I think they're ready to go. So you guys are both welcome to join us on our pinky promise. Right now it's a 2-man pinky promise, but we're happy to make it 4 if you want to join us, Trot.
I like the Cardinals a lot, but I can't join your promise simply because of that division they play in. I can't. Look, the 49ers right now are the class of that division. Seattle came within inches, literally within inches of winning that division last year. So I think Arizona is going to make tremendous strides this year, and I think it will be a dangerous club, but I can't pick it to make the playoffs at this point.
All right, you're out.
I don't have a Brian Baldinger pinky, but it's pretty jacked up, so I couldn't do it anyway. But I can't do it. I love Kyler Murray. I'm with you. I think this guy is going to be one of the best players in the NFL for the next 15 years. Okay, but that offensive line is not. I mean, come on. You got to get D-Hop.
Steve, I'm interrupting you right now, Steve, because we've said this about Seattle. Seattle has had slop in front of Russell Wilson his entire career. But sometimes when you've got David Blaine,
DJ,
when you've got David Blaine back there, it doesn't matter what's in front of you. Russell Wilson's been proving that his whole career.
But they can run. They can run the football in Seattle. That's what they do. When push comes to shove, except for when you're on the 1-yard line of the Super Bowl, they can run the football. The Arizona Cardinals have no desire to run the football. They're going to stretch stuff out with Kenyon Drake and do this and that, but I just can't go there. I do think that defense is going to be vastly improved. Some of the things that are over there, a lot of speed. Here's a player to look out for too. And you guys, Devondre Campbell. The stuff I'm hearing about the former Falcons linebacker, they say he has been absolutely fantastic. I think that defense is going to be better from the jump. Getting Drake Kilpatrick to start opposite Patrick Peterson at that other corner is going to make up for the loss of Robert Alford. Just that offensive line. Come on, you're going up against that 49ers D-line. You are going up against Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers. I don't know what the Seahawks have to offer in that category.
Steve, go watch Texas Tech play. Texas Tech has not produced an offensive lineman in 100 years. And all they do is score 60 points a game in this offense. That's what they're going to do. It's going to be catch, rock, and throw. Catch, rock, and throw. That's what they're going to do.
Texas Tech?
That's what they are.
Texas Tech?
Cardinals are Texas Tech.
Oh, my God.
Okay, since you're going there, I'm going to go North Carolina A&T.
Okay, I like that. I went and scouted a corner. I went and scouted a corner from North Carolina A&T. True story. I went and saw him play. I think it was either Townsend or Morgan, but it was a road game. And Curtis DeLoach is the guy's name. Thank you.
Right.
I remember the name.
Remember him?
Yes.
So I went and scouted him. So I go to the game, and I think it might have been Morgan at the time. And I'm pretty sure they have newer facilities now, but at the time there was like no visitor locker room. So I'm not kidding you. So they pulled the bus up, and it was like a yellow school bus. They pulled the bus up right next to the field. So then, before the game, they would all trot back in, no pun intended, would all go back into the school bus to have their meeting as a team. And then they go they turned the school bus into the visitors' locker room. It was the most ingenious thing I'd ever seen. Because I'm sure all the other teams just sit on the grass, out there behind the goalpost. Like, nope, we got a portable locker room.
But DJ, I need your true scouting report on this.
Yeah.
The halftime bands. How was it?
Strong to very strong. Strong to very strong. Okay.
All right. For those who don't know, if you've never been to a halftime at an HBCU game, and you're speaking to someone who came from California who had never been to a black college game before he got to Howard, it's just a different experience. And no words can describe it to you. You just have to experience it. That's all I can say.
Until you hear neck, which is a hybrid version of cameos talking out the side of your neck by any HBCU marching band. And that is a jam that has been appropriated by LSU's marching band and several others. But until you see the HBCUs out there getting down with the majorettes and the drum major.
See, Buck, this
anytime I hear about Ohio State having the best marching band, I'm like, no.
This is Huddle and Flow. This is what we're going to get on this podcast. By the way, we should be invited for a return engagement at some point in time just to talk HBC scouting experience. Because I'll give you one more. So I go to this was Morgan for sure. I think the other one might have been at Townsend, but I'm not sure. But I went to Morgan State's pro day, and the coach there at the time was just a super good dude. So normally you go to pro days, if you guys have been there, you have the guys in the graduating class, and then maybe they'll let 2 or 3 kids that graduated previously come back, right? 5 tops. I show up to this pro day, mind you. This me and this scout from the Washington football team are the only 2 scouts at the pro day. There was 50 guys there. I'm like, this dude looks like he's 45 years old. They're letting him
probably was.
Yeah.
So we get there, they have no vertex, right? So if you watch the combine, you watch guys do the vertical, they have the little tower of little pegs, and you got to jump up and flick them, and that's how we measure your vertical jump. Well, I go Coach, we can set up for everything we need to do. Like, where should we put the vertex? Like, we don't have vertex. I'm like, oh man, what do I got to do? So I actually was like talking with some older scouts on the phone, like, hey, I'm at this pro day. I'm like in my 1st or 2nd year.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to figure out the vertical for these guys with no vertex? Like, you got to get some
on the wall.
Pool chalk. So you get the pool chalk. You chalk their middle finger. You go into the gym. You have them reach up with their hand and make as high as they can, and then mark that with the pool chalk. Then they have to jump and tap with their. Then you measure the difference, and that's how you get it. So Buck, I did not know this, and I had to do this for 55 guys going through here. So that was my. We can come on and just talk stories. On this pod.
DJ worked too hard. You said you went to the gym. All you had to do was get a basketball hoop out and say who can.
I'm not gonna lie to you.
That's all you had to do.
It got to the point with some of the guys. There was some of the guys that come up there get ready to jump, and I'd be like, hey. You've been training? Yeah. What's the best you've got in practice? Like a 31. All right, good. Jump. Ooh, yep, there you go. 31 and a half. Nice. Okay, we're good. Next, let's bring the next guy through here.
Yeah, but see, DJ, there's a lesson in there too. That's the beauty of HBCUs. We don't focus on what we don't have. We just find a way.
Make it happen.
That's right.
That's right. Prepare us for the real world. So
nothing but smiles on everybody's faces too. I mean, it was actually a fun memory going through that.
Here's one reason why we're going to have you guys on when it comes to scouting, and this is we're going to take a turn to a little serious. So almost every HBCU program is not playing this fall, right? Mm-hmm. Only one player from an HBCU got drafted last year. Only one was invited to the combine, and I don't think any were invited to the Senior Bowl. So without anybody, you see that. I mean, that's limited. And now there's no film for a lot of people because HBCUs are one places where one area where guys get much better from sophomore to junior and junior to senior. And so without any of this, it seems like, man, HBCUs are going to be shut out again without the possibility to play. So we got to have you on to see if there's any way to get people to, to the Senior Bowl. I remember last year they tried to have the HBCU Combine, which would be important, but we don't know where COVID's going to be. Yeah. So this is where I think you guys are going to have to put in your creative chalk on the finger scouting stuff and help us out to see how these scouts are going to be able to find some talent that normally, is going to be hiding under the rug.
It's a good point. And Buck, we were talking about this earlier, but I mean, you have one of the top basketball recruits in the country that goes to Howard. And I think we're going to see that carry over to football here. I really do. And it's going to hopefully kind of reinvigorate some of these programs who have put so many, great Hall of Fame level players in the National Football League to get them rolling again. I think that's coming. I actually have some confidence that we're going to see that turn around.
I hope you're right. I think football's a little different from basketball in terms of the impact that one individual can make, and in terms of the reliance on facilities and television and that sort of thing. So I hope you're right. And even speaking,
if you can play, they find you, Jim. Like if you can play, they're going to find you. That's why, like some of these kids, though, even when you're talking about why I should go to Alabama or whether I should go to Vanderbilt, like, come on, man. If you can play, you can play. You're going to find you. Just go where you want to go to school.
Yeah, but here's the reason. I'm sorry, Bucky, but here's the reason I have pause on that, DJ, as Steve just mentioned. There was only one HBCU player drafted last year. I think the year before there were only 3 or 4. So you cannot tell me that there was not enough talent there, that only 1, 3, or 4 players deserved to be drafted over the last 2 years in the NFL. I refuse to accept that. So I think that scouts are going to have to be. I think that student athletes take that into account, and that's something that's going to have to be overcome. In basketball, look, there are 5 players per team on the court. One individual can make a huge difference, especially when we're talking about if you're able to win your conference and get to the tournament and you have eyes and visibility on you there. Football is a little different. So I hope you're right. I think it would be tremendous. It's something that I've talked about for a long time. What would happen if these elite level 5-star student athletes, Black, decide to go to HBCUs instead of WIs? And if they did, game changer.
I'm gonna say, look, they can be any ethnicity, Black, white, Polynesian, whatever.
Yeah.
That would be huge.
I'm gonna say this about HBCUs, and when it comes to it, like coming out and coming up, like typically what happens in the recruiting world, HBCUs won't go after the 4- and 5-star players because they don't believe that they have a chance. And so when we think about the guys that go on to the National Football League, typically the higher rated recruits in high school going to college are also the ones that are in the pool when it comes to the NFL. And so HBCUs have to feel like they can legitimately get them. Now, the difference is when other teams are recruiting, they have facilities and money and things that they can throw at recruits to show them this is where we're going. That has been a challenge for some of our HBCUs when it comes to being able to have A1 facilities. And so they have to be able to show them the stories that have made it, the Darius Leonards, the Tariq Cohens, those guys. And it can be done, but I think it's going to be a slow process, but I think it's going to come from families wanting their kids to play in that environment rather than the recruiting and everything else. It's the legacy families that have to be the driving force of that change.
But Buck, I want to hit you on this because you have lived in that 7-on-7 world and seen the growth in that space. I know, and Jim talks about, one player in a basketball team, it's 1 of 5. You make an impact as a team. But man, what if an HBC was able to get with a 7-on-7 team, that has a collection of 10 legit big time players, and pitch them on saying, hey guys, if you guys all come together, if we can get, these are 7, 8, 9 4-star level recruits, and you guys come in as one, not only are we going to win a whole lot of football games, you guys are going to continue to push each other. It's going to be good on good. You're going to make each other better. And then we can, that to me would be like the kickstart. It's not going to be one recruit like you would get in basketball. Right. You would need a collection of guys to kind of band together and say, we're going to do it.
And I would say the team that has the opportunity to legitimately do it, I would say would be someone, and I don't want to be disrespectful to any HBCU, but I would say like a brand name, meaning a name that transcends the world and is more mainstream. So when we talk about Howard and the momentum that Howard has, Howard would have that opportunity. We've seen it in basketball. We have seen their coach, Larry Scott, begin to try and make inroads to be a national recruiting power. Grambling, Southern, those schools, because they play on a national stage with the Bayou Classic, they would have an opportunity. And if they begin to jump up and kickstart and begin to get some of these prominent recruits and win games, because they're going to have to knock off a traditional team, that will be the beginning of it. But look, it's a long road to hoe, but it has to be the families wanting their kids to play there. Coaches continue to recruit those players, and at some point they find a middle ground.
And quickly, Bucky, I think the legacy family part, I'm sorry, Jim, the legacy family part is huge, right? So when I was in high school getting recruited back outside of St. Louis, my mother's always like, what about Grambling, because I'm getting let, from, Missouri and Kansas State, places like that. She said, what about Grambling and Southern? I was like, I have not heard from any of them. Okay, so the recruiting budgets, even today, are so small. So even getting in on a 7-on-7 level, if you're in Greensboro, North Carolina, like NC-A&T, or if you're in, Jackson, Mississippi, that they don't have the budget. And the way a lot of HBCUs appropriate money for their athletics, they appropriate it department-wide. It's hard to earmark funds for a specific sport for a lot of these HBCUs. So it's a lot of things to overcome. But I'm with you, DJ. If they can get in on some of these 7-on-7 levels, and if coaches could stay at programs long enough to establish relationships with high school coaches, that's another thing that happens. The churn through head coaches at HBCUs is constant. So it's very, very hard for them to establish these relationships, to establish pipelines to those universities.
Wow, this has been fun. I've kept you guys probably 20 minutes longer than I was supposed to. But, Bucky and I just love hanging out with you. This is what it feels like. Like, this is our kind of green room conversation that we have.
Right.
We're just having it on our podcast, and you guys are going to get the opportunity to have it on yours. It's called Huddle and Flow. It's currently available on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. Do yourself a favor, subscribe to this right now. You're going to love it, because these are not only two of the smarter men that we get a chance to work with, but two of the best dudes as well. So you guys are going to enjoy what they have coming up. That first episode, by the way, I guess I should say, drops September 8th. So you can find it there. Anything, Buck, before we roll out of here?
No, man, I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to you guys having a platform to not only utilize your voices, but to bring other people in so their voices can be heard. So I can't wait. September 8th, I'm going to be all on. I'll make sure I download it.
Appreciate you guys.
It's going to be hot, that first one.
Yeah, so it will be. We've got two guests. We've got two guests coming on. We're going to keep it real. And before I go, just paying an homage to a fellow Howardite, the late actor Chadwick Boseman. Wakanda forever. We're all heartbroken over this, and really appreciate you guys having us on to talk about this.
Yeah, let me double down, Steve. Let me give some love to John Thompson, too, another DC legend.
Absolutely.
Who passed away this morning, and I was at Howard during the time those Georgetown teams were going strong, man. And John was he was an icon, to see a black man who was unapologetically black in a sporting world that was predominantly white at that level, and the way that he loved on his players, and tough love at times. Those things have an impact on young black men growing up. And I can say, me watching him, just what a special man.
Those are my three favorite teams. I guarantee you guys, I'm the only person on planet Earth, as Bucky knows. I was born in Fort Wayne, so I'm a lifelong Indiana basketball fan. But Indiana was my team, and my two other favorite teams I loved to watch growing up were Georgetown and UNLV. Like those were like, that was John Thompson, those teams. I mean, I just remember thinking they were so big and so physical. They had felt like a NBA, all NBA center, just one after another, after another, after another. And then you had AI and all those. I mean, those were fun teams to watch, man.
Yeah, tremendous loss.
Yes, tough loss for sure.
All right. Well, again, 2020 can't get over fast enough, guys. Let's good news on the horizon here in 2021. Hopefully, we can. Things will improve on a lot of fronts. But I appreciate you guys so much. Best of luck with the new pod.
Appreciate you guys having us.